Hi everyone, Janie here. Welcome back. I'm obviously not in my garden. Jason and I took a little bit trip this morning. We are in Napa at Van Windens Garden Center. I love this place. I have filmed a couple videos here before with Eileen. Today I want to introduce you to somebody new. This is Sam. Sam is actually a horticulturist. You went to UC Davis,
Yep.
right? So, you know, I have a special connection with you. So Sam works here at Van Windens, and we are going to talk a little bit about some products today for your garden, specifically pest control products, right? So when you have somebody come in and say, oh, I have this problem, I have this bug in my garden, what's the first thing that, you know, we should kind of think about to help with pests in your garden?
So one of the first things to think about is, why are you having a pest problem?
Mm-hmm.
Typically the answer is this is a pest that lives in this environment,
Right.
and you have a delicious plant that it wants to eat.
Mm-hmm. Take it as a compliment, maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as gardeners, we want our gardens to be beautiful and not have little caterpillar holes in our leaves and everything like that.
Right.
But has to be some acknowledgement that this is part of our ecosystem, hasn't.
Yes.
I've had some people ask, well, I have holes in my butterfly bush leaves, and I tell them, those are the baby butterflies.
That's what you want, actually. Yeah. So we can't really expect to eradicate all of the bugs, right?
Yeah.
Because if we eradicate all of them, then that completely stops the whole cycle.
It does.
That makes a garden a garden.
It does, and it disrupts everything. You have your beneficials that rely on your obnoxious herbivorous pests, but they come around and they do good work, and they need to have those insects present in order for them to keep living.
Right. So probably a huge mistake, and I can say this because I've done this before, is I've seen a pest in my garden, white flies, and I've gotten, oh my goodness, I have white flies, and I stomped my way down to the garden center, and I bought a very strong synthetic pesticide and sprayed it all over my garden, and there was basically a cloud of smoke around my garden. And so I killed the white flies, but I also killed everything else in my garden.
Yeah.
So what did I do wrong there?
Yeah, so when you're looking for a pesticide where you want to preserve as much of your environment as possible, you want to find something that is ideally selective for that pesticide, or for that pest rather.
Right.
If something for like whitefly, there's not really selective pesticides for that, but you can use one where its mode of action is only going to affect the insects that you directly attack.
Okay.
So for whitefly, typically oils that work through suffocation are what we recommend.
Okay.
Which means that this pesticide only affects the insect that it physically touches.
Okay.
So anything that comes into the area after application isn't going to be affected.
Okay.
Which is pros and cons. Good for your beneficials, annoying when you have the whitefly from your neighbors move in.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's not always an all or none thing. Now this is kind of like IPM, right? Can you tell us a little bit about IPM?
So IPM stands for Integrated Pest Management.
Okay.
It is the idea that you are not just looking at pesticides as a way to control pest issues. You're also looking at your environment.
Okay.
You're looking at your sanitation practices.
Right.
You're looking about what plants you're growing in this environment.
Right.
There's something called the disease triangle, which
Okay.
has 3 points. It has host,
Okay.
pest or pathogen, and environment. And all 3 of those have to be present in the right way for a disease to occur.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So say that again. We have the pest, or say it.
So we have a triangle, we have
Okay.
the host,
Okay.
our pests,
Okay.
and environment.
Okay. All right. So it has to be all kind of perfectly set up for the white flies to come in, or whatever else it is.
Yeah. For example, spider mites are infamous in dusty, windy, hot, dry environments.
Yeah.
If you have an environment where you're able to artificially increase your humidity, you will probably drop your pest presence lower.
Because you're affecting the environment portion of that triangle. Interesting. That's an interesting way to think about IPM. I'm going to steal that from you and talk about it that way. So then how do we use IPM? You know, like say you have the spider mites, what would be your first step using the IPM method to attack the spider mites? Would it be, I don't know, spraying down your boxwoods or something like that?
Yeah, so kind of the first step, spraying things down with water.
Right.
If you can. A lot of times, living in Northern California, hot, dry, dusty summers are typical.
Completely.
And which means that, keep in mind, you're probably going to have spider mites in your garden.
Right.
It happens.
Yes.
Certainly planting plants that don't need as much water and are not as sensitive to low humidity, that doesn't stress it out as much.
Oh, okay.
That will make it a more resilient plant for the environment.
Okay.
Or you can modify your environment by watering more. If it's more indoor environment, increasing your humidity.
Right.
Or you can attack the pest directly and go for the oils.
The products.
The products.
Which is really what we're here to talk about today. Because one of the most common questions that I get whenever I talk about any type of product is, what should I use for whiteflies? What should I use for spider mites? What should I use for aphids? And I think coming to the experts here at Van Windens in Napa is probably the way to go, because Sam, you really know how to recommend the right thing.
Yeah.
Now, today we're talking about organics, right?
Yes.
And so what's the benefit of using, like, take away all the, you know, the bragging rights of organic and the environmental rights of organic. Just let's just talk specifically about your garden, your plants, and you know, your soil and all that kind of stuff. What's the benefit of using organic products versus synthetic products?
Yes. So for a lot of organic products, the mode of action, which is how the product affects the insect, is not always something that can develop resistance towards.
Okay.
We're definitely seeing products like BT. We know in agriculture there are resistance developing to BT.
Yeah.
But
Which is scary.
Which is very scary. But on a garden level, we're not likely to see that because the application is not so intense all the time.
And BT is
Bacillus thuringiensis.
And that's what we normally use for caterpillars.
Caterpillars. It's also certain another subtype of BT is also very effective against fly larvae.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's mosquito bits.
Oh,
yeah.
Hey, cool.
So
I've used mosquito bits.
Yeah, exactly. It's a type of BT.
Yeah.
So, but it's biological. It's a bacteria that produces compounds that affect certain groups of insects, and because BT, each strain has different effects on different insects, it can be very targeted.
Right.
So it's one of those where it is more targeted. It's not going to overspray onto everything. You can also, a lot of organic pesticides are oils, which again work through smothering.
Okay.
So it's only point of contact.
Yes. Rather than the big cloud over your garden like I did.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So a lot of times the organics, not to say that they cannot hurt beneficials,
right,
but they typically have less of a effect on beneficials that come into the area after application.
Which is kind of the definition of IPM, which is doing the least amount of damage while still treating the problem.
Yes.
So as we're looking at the IPM steps, you know, you start with something like physically picking those caterpillars off of your cabbages or off of your supertunias. And then if you can't handle that, then you'll spray the BT, right? And then, you know, don't even go to the point where you spray the systemic and have the fog, right?
Yeah.
It's not even worth it to get to that point, because at that point you're disturbing everything in your garden.
Yeah. And unfortunately, even though we wish we could grow everything you want, that might be where you have to reconsider, does this plant belong in this space?
Is it worth it to try and grow it because of what I'm going to do to everything else in my garden just to have this one plant?
Yes.
Which is a hard pill to swallow.
Absolutely.
Right?
We grow everything.
No gardeners like to hear that, but unfortunately it is the truth, right? So, okay, well, let's go look at a couple of products that you all recommend, and then maybe you can tell us what you would recommend us using the product for.
Sure.
Okay? Okay, Sam, so you have picked out kind of a handful, and this is just a sample of things
Yes.
that you all would recommend at Van
Yes.
Windens. Let's get started with the one that I am not familiar with, which is this disease control.
Yes.
And you were just telling me you're kind of excited about this
Yes.
one. Tell us a
So-
little bit about that.
This is my favorite fungicide that we have available for our customers. It's one that I use myself at home.
So fungicide deals with...
So fungicide, it attacks fungal diseases
Okay.
of plants. And this is actually also not only a fungicide, but a bactericide.
Okay.
So basically an antibiotic.
Oh,
Plant
interesting.
version. So what this is another type of bacillus bacteria. It's
Oh.
Bacillus amylocafaciens,
Okay.
which is a soil-dwelling bacteria.
I'm going to put that spelling on the screen.
Yes, it's a long word.
I'm impressed that you can say that.
Practice. So what this does is it actually colonizes plant surfaces, particularly roots in the soil, but as well as stem and foliar surfaces.
Huh.
And when fungal spores encounter it, the bacteria attacks the fungus.
Oh,
And so it doesn't allow the spore to infect the plant.
interesting.
It's also one of the few fungicides that I have seen and have read about it being effective after fungal infection. A lot of fungicides are preventative. So things like sulfur, copper soap,
Yeah.
they can only do so much once the fungus is present.
Right.
Because a lot of times the fungal aspects of the disease that you see are their reproductive structures, where the rest of it's inside the plant.
It's already done its damage.
Yeah, so you
Got it.
can't get to it.
So kind of like we preemptively spray for peach leaf curl.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have peach leaf curl, you're a little late.
Yeah.
There's not much you can
Not
do.
much you can do.
Right?
Exactly.
So this one is different?
In my experience, its directions are spray once a week until you don't see signs of the disease.
Interesting.
In my own use, which caveat, it was for an indoor plant, so less inoculum coming in from around the environment.
Right.
But it literally got rid of powdery mildew in 2 applications, which was really exciting for me because when I was going through school, it was basically like, once powdery mildew shows up, there's nothing you can do.
Take the plant. You're finished.
So,
Interesting.
and while I haven't used this outside to see how it would do,
Yeah.
my guess is that it would, at the very least, would reduce the spread because it would
Interesting.
kill down the spores before they could spread out.
So you might have powdery mildew, but you can keep it to one plant
Yeah.
or something like that,
Yeah.
as opposed to it spreading completely everywhere.
And it works really well as a preventative as well.
Okay.
It's going to be, honestly, its biggest impact is as a preventative.
Okay. So how would you recommend using this? Would you, like, say you all have a garden and you get powdery mildew every year. Would you recommend spraying it once a week on those susceptible plants, or how would you recommend it?
At the very least, I would start once you start seeing new spring growth emerge,
Oh, okay.
because that's going to be your more vulnerable tissue. So you
Okay.
want to protect that
Okay.
as soon as you can. And then it's really keeping a close eye and monitoring. Are you beginning to see any disease presence anywhere? As soon as you do, spray then. Don't let it get really bad.
Right.
And
Right.
then, again, see how you respond. Pest control is a very dynamic
Right.
thing. It's not, a lot of times when people are feeling uncertain about it, they want a prescriptive, do this every so often and
Right.
it'll all be fine.
I want that.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
But
It doesn't always work that
we're
way.
dealing
Nature
with such
doesn't work that
complex
way.
living
Yeah.
systems that we can guess how things will respond, but we can't guarantee it.
Right. Right.
So.
So tell everyone about your experiment this year with this product.
Yeah, so what I will be attempting in my efforts at home
Yeah.
is I want to see how this performs as a transplant aid.
Okay.
So because it is a soil-dwelling bacteria that is particularly colonizes root structures in order to protect them from soil-borne pathogens attacking the roots.
Right.
And including the infamous damping off.
I was just gonna say,
Pathogens.
I wonder if this would work for like seedlings and
Yeah.
stuff, right?
It, you know, based on the reading I've done, it shows efficacy against Pythium, against Rhizoctonia,
Wow.
potentially against some forms of Phytophthora.
Okay.
So I think there's promise there as for seedlings as well.
Awesome. So you are going to be experimenting with this year.
Yes.
I will come back next year.
You can ask how
And
it's
give me the
gone.
results
Yes,
of your experiment,
yes.
because I think that that's really neat, and it's
Yeah.
really neat that you understand the what am I trying to say, the mechanism of this,
Yeah.
and then you're taking that and applying that to another. I
Yeah.
just think it's really interesting. I say this in the nicest way possible. You're a plant nerd.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I am too.
I have a sweatshirt that says it right
Do you?
across the
Oh,
front.
I love that. Next time I come, you can wear that. Okay.
Yes.
What else do we have here? Let's go with neem oil. So we went with one that I'm not familiar with.
Yes.
And now neem oil I've used quite a bit.
Yes.
So tell us about neem oil.
So neem oil, probably one of the more popular pesticides. Certainly very popular within the houseplant realm,
Yes.
which is where I live my life.
Oh, yeah. Oh, really? Oh, that's
Pretty
great.
much. So there's two main types of neem oil, and they do make a difference. So there's cold pressed neem,
Oh.
and then there's clarified neem.
Oh, I had no idea.
They do actually function a little differently.
No idea there was even two different kinds.
So this particular product is cold pressed.
How do you know it's cold pressed?
It says
right there. I've
Yeah.
never looked.
Yeah. And then pretty much everything else will say either clarified extracted neem or hydrophobic clarified extracted neem,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay.
So the neem oil is the seed oil from the neem tree, which is Azadirachta is the genus.
Okay.
And it contains compounds in it, even before it's been pressed or clarified or anything. It contains compounds called liminoids.
Okay.
Liminoids are a group of phytochemicals that are found in things like citrus and cucumber plants, or cucumber family, I should say, and as well as the neem family.
Okay.
And they are insecticidal.
Okay.
So cold pressed neem oil has all those liminoids in it.
All right.
And probably the most well-known one for neem is azadirachtin.
Okay.
The azadirachtin actually directly affects insect growth. It interferes with the insect growth hormone ecdysone. And so the insect, once consuming azadirachtin, cannot molt properly.
Oh.
So it completely disrupts its growth cycle.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's taking the smothering, like you were saying,
And adding.
and
Yeah.
that's so interesting.
Yeah. Azadirachtin can also discourage feeding from that plant.
Uh-huh.
There have been studies that show some groups of insects would rather starve to death than eat a plant that has azadirachtin on it.
Interesting. So azadirachtin is in cold pressed neem oil. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That is so interesting.
Yeah. And it has an effect on more than just soft-bodied insects.
Okay.
You know, it can be discouraging to beetles as well.
Okay.
They are less likely to engage with the plant that you've just treated with it.
Interesting. So Japanese beetles?
I'm not sure if it's on the label, but
Okay. But technically
Yeah.
the mechanism might help with that.
Yeah.
I get questions all the time about Japanese beetles, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because we really don't get them here. I know. I'm sorry to all of you that have to deal with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So cold pressed neem oil, and then.
So clarified neem oil is kind of the process or the product that's left after azadirachtin is extracted. Because you can find products that are just azadirachtin that are no longer contained within the rest of the neem oil. So you don't have like the full complex phytochemical makeup, but still effective. So after the azadirachtin is extracted for typically other products, the remaining oil is heat treated and clarified.
Okay.
The heat treatment will break down any other of the liminoids or azadirachtin that's present.
Okay.
And so you basically, the result is an oil that works pretty much only through suffocation.
Okay.
So it's much more effective on soft-bodied insects and mites.
Okay. Why would you take out all that stuff? Why would you bother taking out all that stuff?
this costs a lot more.
Oh, got it. That makes sense. Okay.
Yes. Because if you think about it, this is multiple products that they've left into one.
Yeah.
Whereas for the clarified, they've been able
taken
to
the good
extract
stuff.
other products out, and they can make, the producers can make more money.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
It makes sense.
So there's a lot of talk about neem oil. It's a natural organic product, but there is a lot of debate on, does it do too much, right? Can maybe harm other beneficials. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is one of those things where reading the label for the pesticide is very important.
Okay.
On all pesticide labels, they are going to include the environmental hazards of this product.
Yes, yeah.
And it should be towards the beginning of the label.
Okay.
And what that will let you know is it'll tell you if there's any restrictions on when or where you can apply this product.
Got it.
For things like neem, you are recommended to apply either early in the morning or in the evening.
Okay.
One of those reasons is to reduce potential burn on your plant, because you are setting an oil directly on your leaf.
Yep.
If it's an oil and it's 85 degrees outside in the sun, your plant is not going to be happy with that.
It's like putting baby oil and laying out in the sun. Yeah.
Exactly. And a little extra tan.
Yeah, right?
But the other thing is that if you spray this on a bee, you're going to take down the bee.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a lot of times, honeybees are used as basically a model organism for how pesticides affect
Other
those
beneficials.
Yeah. Yeah, they're kind of used as a stand-in for beneficials.
Right. Even though there's many other beneficials.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely. And the other thing is because it does work on contact, if you have a lacewing on your plant and you spray it, the lacewing's going down.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of the reason why we say, IPM is the way to go. This is not your first step. This is not your first thing to do if you notice a pest problem.
Yeah.
There are many other things to do, which, what are they called? Mechanical and, why am I blanking? Beneficial? Is that what you call it?
Biocontrol.
Biocontrol. That's what I'm thinking of. There's many other things that you can do first, and these are what you reach for when that's not working, right? And so I just want to make sure that that's clear, that we are not saying, oh yeah, you see one thing and you go and run and get this. There's other things. This is when you're kind of out of options and there's nothing else that you can do. And so this is where you would go next. And this is actually a good option based on what Sam is saying.
Yeah. Within agriculture, there's a concept of economic injury threshold, which is where when you have a pest present and in low levels, the pest doesn't impact your crop to the point where the value of the crop significantly degrades. But once it does, that's when you have to apply something.
That's when you have to take action.
And ideally, you're monitoring and doing sanitation all before that happens.
Right.
But that's really where the pesticides come in, is once you hit that level.
Right. And I think all of us have gardeners have that tolerance level. Some of us have more of a tolerance than others, but once it hits your tolerance level, then it's time to come see Sam, right? So, all right. So we've got neem, we've got the disease control. This one looks super familiar to me. I love it so much.
Yes. So anybody comes in with slug or snail problems, we pretty much always go to Sluggo Plus.
Right.
There is regular Sluggo, and they have the same active ingredient that affects snails and slugs, which is iron phosphate.
Okay.
So the Sluggo itself is a granular. The granule contains an attractant that brings in slugs and snails.
Okay.
So you never want to apply it at the base of your plant, because the idea is they have to find this before they find your plant.
Oh.
You want it kind of around.
News to me.
But if it's right next to your plant, you're drawing them in.
Oh, okay. That's news to me.
Yeah. So for like raised beds, I usually recommend at the outer perimeter.
I'm so glad you told me this. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
I always put it as close as I could to the,
I mean, so the way that this works is the iron phosphate, once they consume it, it immediately disrupts calcium metabolism in the gut. And so they stop feeding almost immediately.
And they
starve. It's the almost, that's the catch there. So which is why you don't want it right next to your plant.
Got it.
That being said, so they'll stop feeding nearly immediately, and then they will die in 3 to 6 days.
Okay.
This Sluggo Plus contains an additional compound, which is what's effective against the cutworms, sow bugs, pill bugs, earwigs.
Yep.
And that is called spinosad.
Okay.
So spinosad is a bacterial product. It's not the live culture of the bacteria.
Okay.
And it is a mix of compounds that are called spinosins that come from the fermentation of Saccharopolyspora.
Okay.
Saccharopolyspora spinosa.
Impressive, right?
So, which is actually, it's a soil-dwelling bacteria that was found in old rum distilleries from sugarcane.
Oh, interesting.
So,
Oh, how funny.
Yeah.
What an interesting way to
I
find
know, right? So the way that it works, these spinosins, what they do is they hyper-excite the insect's nervous system. And so what happens is they, basically the nerves keep firing. They don't stop firing. And it causes all the muscles to contract. And it basically causes it to seize to death. It's not a happy end for the insect. But we're usually not caring about whether or not the insects get a happy end. We want them dead at the end. So,
so that's the spinosin.
Yes.
That's not the phosphate.
That's not the phosphate.
Okay.
Yeah. So the phosphate really only hits the snails and slugs.
Okay.
And the spinosad has a really wide range. It can affect caterpillars. It can affect flies, beetles. It has a pretty wide range, and it works. This is obviously a granular. It has to be consumed.
Right.
There are also liquid formulations that can work through contact and ingestion.
Does this help with ants?
Yes.
Oh, it does.
It'll kill ants, but it is also toxic to bees and wasps.
Got it.
So I've potentially recommended spinosad for ground nesting yellow jackets.
Oh.
To be fair, I'm not sure how that resulted.
Yeah. But the idea is there.
Yeah. So it's definitely, when applying the liquid formulations, you do not want to apply when bees are active.
Right.
You ideally don't want to apply it on plants where bees will engage with while it's still wet.
Okay. Because it'll still be effective.
It'll still be effective against the
them.
bees. Yes.
And that's another really good example. Read the label. The label will say on there the right time to spray.
Yeah.
So that you limit the damage.
Yeah. And spinosad, there's no recorded observed effects on mammals.
Okay.
Mildly toxic to fish, so don't spray it down the gutter.
Right.
But very toxic to bees, because that whole group of insects, so bees, wasps, ants, they're all very closely related. Okay. And it hits that whole spectrum.
Interesting.
The efficacy of this degrades very quickly after getting wet.
Okay.
So if you're applying it in the winter, or if you're applying it in an area that you irrigate heavily, you're going to have to apply more frequently.
Okay. Which is frustrating, because that's when the slugs and snails come out.
Exactly. Yes.
I go through so much of this stuff. It's ridiculous.
And this is another one of those things that's good to apply in the morning or the evening, because that's when your slugs and snails are most active.
100%. Yeah. And then again, I'm going to go back to the IPM, right? There's other ways, you can physically pick the snails, which I don't want to do. Yep. There's the beer method, where you put a tray of beer and they drown in that. I've done it before. It's gross as well. This to me is, it's just kind of the easiest for me, the way to go. Yeah. And if I don't treat slugs and snails, at least in my garden's gone. Yeah. So we have that much of a problem with slugs and snails here. Yes. Definitely. All right. Talk to us about BT. Okay. This is the one I use the most. Yeah. More than Sluggo.
So BT is another bacterial biological pesticide. Okay. So this is Bacillus thuringiensis kerstaki, which is what's in this bottle. And kerstaki is a subspecies of BT that is effective against caterpillars. Okay. So that the way that this works is when a caterpillar consumes the bacteria or their toxins, the toxins form together to make a crystal aggregate. Okay. And what happens is that crystal gets inserted into the cell wall of the lining of the insect gut. And it creates a hole straight through the gut and then the insect dies because nothing's gonna
Not because
be happy with those in their gut.
No.
So that's
like
that's
having
how
massive
this,
ulcers.
Yeah, exactly. So this is how that works against that insect. That sounds a little scary, but it's very selective.
Okay.
And it does not have any effect on mammals.
Okay.
There are other subtypes of BT. There's Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis, which is particularly effective against fly larvae. And so mosquito larvae, fungus gnats, and that is found in a product called mosquito bits. And personally, that's what I use for all the fungus gnats in my houseplants.
Me too.
A little bit of sprinkle of mosquito bits.
Yeah.
No more problem.
I have made, or I do make beef tea.
Yeah.
Like I basically steep it in water and then I pour the tea to all in it, and it works great.
It does.
You know.
It does.
So that's a different kind of
It's a different
BT.
kind. Yeah. So if you use this would not be very effective against fungus gnats.
Okay.
And then the mosquito bits are not going to help so much with your caterpillar problems.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So this one, budworms are my arch nemesis because I really love supertunias, petunias, and budworms love those.
Yes.
And I use this, and I usually use it during the season when they're present. I usually use it once a week, kind of, you know, systemic. Is that recommended? Is that how you would use it?
Yeah, because it needs to be present on the plant for it to work.
Okay.
And it has to be ingested for it to work.
Right.
It's one of those things where you want to follow the label. You know, the label will have restrictions on how frequently you can apply.
Right. Yeah.
For things like this, a week is probably, you know, fine and within the recommendations.
Right.
And you want to apply when you have active caterpillars, but if you can almost get it right before the caterpillars show up.
Right before,
Yeah.
Because I feel like I don't notice them until it's a huge issue.
Budworms, it's hard because you need to get it somehow inside the bud.
Right.
Because that's where they start eating. So
Right.
you need it almost on the outside of the flower bud before they take their first chomp.
Yeah.
And that's very difficult to time perfectly. Budworms are a plague.
I spend the most money on these two, but now this disease control, I want to try and see how that does. Tell us about the Pest Fighter.
So the Pest Fighter is probably one of my more recommended oils. This works through suffocation, so very similar to the clarified extract of neem.
Okay.
One of the reasons I like it is it has a little bit higher of a temperature tolerance. So in the summer, I caution people about using neem oil because you can start seeing negative effects on the leaves, 85 degrees-ish.
That we are above almost all summer.
This gives you a little bit more leeway. It's really more about 90 degrees that you might start seeing damage.
A little bit better.
A little bit better. The other nice thing about it is it's scentless.
Oh.
Because some people really don't like the way neem smells.
I hate the way neem smells.
I appreciate, I understand that. And while it shouldn't be very stinky after it's dry, this I use for my houseplants because I don't have to smell the neem.
Nice, nice. So tell me what type of pests you're hitting with this one.
So this is great for soft-bodied pests.
Okay.
So your
Aphids.
whitefly, soft scale, mites.
Okay.
In terms of dealing with scale insects, because they have that protective shell, those are one of those pests that you really need to spray on a weekly basis because you're hitting all those life cycles.
Yeah.
As the eggs hatch, that's when they're most vulnerable to pesticides.
Boy.
I know.
Ugh.
They're a pain.
Scale is so gross.
Yeah.
I found them on some salvia and it was like, what?
I know.
Is that?
Yeah.
So, all right. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting to see that.
And so what this is this is a refined mineral oil. It is petroleum based. It's not a synthetic oil.
Okay.
And it does have a little bit, this product itself has a little bit of an emulsifier in it so that it sprays better more evenly, mixes with the water more evenly.
Right.
And it's a year-round oil, and for dormant spray, we actually do recommend this for dealing with overwintering insects on your dormant plants.
Got it.
So, for example, curly leaf on plum is almost always aphids. It's not a fungus.
Okay.
And you want to knock back your aphid population before your plum starts leafing out.
Right.
So that anything that hid in the cracks and crannies of the tree is not there in the spring
Right.
to get the pest population started off with a bang.
In another video, I'll have to have you explain all of the dormant sprays in more detail, because that's one topic that I have trouble,
Yeah.
Right? So I'd love for you to go over that in a future video. So we've gone over all 5. Let's just do a quick recap for the type of bug, the type of pest.
Yes.
So say, for instance, you have, if you were going to reach for neem, what type of bugs would you be having in your garden? Or your houseplants?
Yeah. Spider mites,
Okay.
white fly, aphids, scale. This would probably be a little bit more effective against scale than just the clarified neem or the Pest Fighter.
Because it has
it has the azadirachtin in it.
Right. I'm going to have to look up how to spell that.
Yeah.
And then this disease control is a fungicide.
Yes, and a bactericide. So
Okay.
bacterial leaf spot, this will actually help with. Can't guarantee it's going to eradicate anything.
What about black spot on roses?
That'll help.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that would be something like this.
Yeah.
Slugs.
Slugs, snails,
Earwigs.
cutworms, basically your soil surface insects that want to come and just chomp your plant down.
The ones I hate.
Yep.
And then we'll go to Monterey.
Yeah.
BT.
So this one in particular is caterpillars, and it's basically any kind of caterpillar for the most part.
So remember, caterpillars turn into
Your butterflies.
butterflies. So just kind of think of that, right?
Yeah. Don't spray this on milkweed.
No. If you have a pollinator garden, right? So if you have a pollinator
be really
garden,
careful with applying this.
This you don't want to overspray it at all. So just something to think about, right? Research all these things even a little bit more. Go to your local garden center and ask them to explain it even a little bit more to you. Sam is just kind of going over just a general, just to kind of get us started.
Yeah.
Last one, the Pest Fighter.
Pest Fighter, great again for soft-bodied insects and mites. And with heavy infestations, spraying weekly.
Yeah.
Best way to really get a handle on
the
it.
dormant and all that.
And the dormant
kind of
oil, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have one more question.
Absolutely.
You have a lot of concentrates here.
Yes.
Right? So you can buy most of these products in either a ready to use, which is like in a spray bottle, or a concentrate. And a concentrate you would have to buy a
sprayer.
Sprayer.
You could do a pump sprayer. There are also hose end sprayers.
Okay.
That usually involves a little bit of math because the hose end sprayers are set to pull a certain quantity of what's in the mix container with the water coming out from your hose.
So you have to know how much.
So you have to know how much to put in that small container. So a little bit of math. A lot of these products do come in a ready-to-spray format, which is the hose end attachment is already on the bottle.
Do you want to show that?
So for the Pest Fighter, that's what that looks like.
And that's going to come out at the right
It's going to come out at the right rate.
Yeah.
But you can't adjust the rate. So it's at the sort of standard rate, but if you needed to increase a little bit or decrease a little bit based on how you're seeing your plants or the pests respond, you can't do it with this.
Got it.
But it's a lot easier to do if you have large plants, because you can use the water pressure of your hose to get up into the canopy.
So say you have a huge tree that you got to reach to the top.
Yeah.
You probably want to do something like that than a handheld sprayer.
Yes.
Now, say I have one handheld sprayer and I have all these products. Would you recommend using the same sprayer, or would you recommend getting different sprayer?
If your sanitation is very good.
Okay. Say it's not.
So typically, when cleaning your spray materials, you want to do what's called a triple rinse.
Okay.
This ideally would involve both your measuring utensils as well as your spray unit itself.
Okay.
So a triple rinse is filling it up with water, after spraying, shaking it out, dumping it, doing that 2 more times.
Okay.
And
not dumping it down the storm drain.
Nope, not dumping it down the storm drain. Ideally, putting it, let that rinse kind of be dumped where you sprayed. If you can enter that spray area safely afterwards.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And letting it percolate through the soil.
Yeah. So you do that 3 times.
Do that 3 times, and it should be okay. But I will admit I have a separate sprayer for oils.
Good to know. I was wondering. Yes. That's why I asked that question.
I do have a sprayer that's oils only.
Well, Sam, thank you so much. I cannot believe how much you know. there was a little outline, right, that you did, and I was
Yes.
reading it just like, oh my God.
Well, and I got to learn so many things too when I was researching it. So
I just think it's so great. So we are at Van Windens Nursery. Sam works here and you work here along with Eileen, who I've interviewed as well. I don't know how Van Windens got you guys, but they better be happy. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. So if you all are local for Napa, I mean, I think I've told you this so many times, but come see Van Windens, come talk to the staff here. They're so knowledgeable. Every time I come here, I learn something new, and also I buy 10 things. Thank you, Sam. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you all have a chance to get in your garden today.